As a lifelong railroad enthusiast and Lego collector, one of my favorite pastimes and hobbies was collecting and building Lego train models. However, most of the trains in my collection are either official Lego sets or were created with custom Lego instructions provided by third party Lego designers. So, I decided it was finally time to design and build a Lego train of my own design, and to get some inspiration, I traveled to the Railroad Museum of Pennsylvania. When I got to the museum, I quickly decided that I only wanted to focus on the locomotives that had been built by or operated by the Pennsylvania Railroad, and I was left with no shortage of inspiration. Number 7002 is a Class E7 Atlantic, a type of locomotive built for express passenger service. Also allegedly a record holder, this is in actuality number 8063, as the original 7002 was scrapped. The A5 class were the largest class of 040 tender engines built anywhere in the world, and were used primarily by the Pennsy for switching purposes. Now, number 94 is the only A5 left. Number 5741 is a Class G5 460 10-wheeler locomotive. This class of locomotive was used by the Pennsy for short commuter trains. Now, number 5741, which recently turned 100 years old, is one of only 3 G5s remaining. The H6 class locomotives were freight engines with a 280 wheel arrangement, an arrangement type which would at one point constitute 44% of the Pensy's total locomotive roster. Nearly 2,000 H6 class locomotives were built, with a small number even being sent to work in China during the Japanese occupation. Now, number 2846 is the only remaining H6 and has multiple labels pointing out specific parts of the locomotive. Pennsylvania Railroad number 5901 is a Class E7 EMD locomotive and was built for pulling express passenger trains. She was the first diesel to be purchased by the Pennsy and is now the only member of her class left. Having seen all of the indoor exhibits that I wanted to see, I decided it was time to go to the outdoor section of the museum to see the exhibits located there. Number 3750 is a Class K4 Pacific locomotive, a locomotive type that many consider to be legendary. 3750 pulled the campaign train of President Warren Harding, and later pulled his funeral train too. She was preserved as a stand-in for the very first K4, number 1737, after that locomotive deteriorated beyond preservation. Now, 3750 is displayed outside, in similar condition to the engine she was meant to replace. Number 520 is the only remaining L1 locomotive, a class which shared many components with the K4s, including a boiler, cab, firebox, and rear pony truck. In November of 1942, 520 suffered a boiler explosion which killed several people and was subsequently repaired. Shortly before the end of steam operations on the Pennsy in 1957, 520 pulled one last rail excursion before being withdrawn. The L1 tenders, like other freight locomotives, were equipped with a small cab for the head brakeman. Known as a doghouse, this was so the head brakeman could keep watch over the whole train. The museum also had several model train layouts, of which included a Lego model train layout featuring a Lehigh Valley multiple unit and a Pennsylvania Railroad GP9. But while all these locomotives were interesting, all of them had been done before by other Lego model train designers, and I wanted to do something new that hadn't been done before. And finally, I found just that. Pennsylvania Railroad Class H3 number 1187. Just by looking at it, I already knew how I was going to pull off some of the locomotive features. It was decided. 1187 was going to be the engine I was going to design and build a model of. Before I proceeded with actually designing 1187, I needed to decide how to power it, and I chose to use LEGO's Powered Up system, utilizing the battery box / receiver, remote, as well as a small motor. I started off by creating 1187's base, which included 8 custom drive wheels courtesy of Big Ben Bricks. Each wheel is spaced 2.5 studs from each other, and this required an order of custom drive rods from Trained Bricks. Both Big Ben Bricks and Train Bricks provide third-party elements for mock train builds, and I cannot recommend or thank them enough. Toothed gears mounted in the engine's frame and on the first 3 driving axles form the engine's drivetrain. This is powered with a motor mounted behind the panels, which represent 1187's firebox and ash pan. After constructing the frame, I recreated it in a computer program called LEGO Digital Designer, and then built the rest of the engine around it. Big Ben Bricks wheels are not present in LEGO Digital Designer, so I had to suspend the model above the tracks as shown here. Some other pieces that I would end up using, such as the windows, were also not present in the program. And finally, I present to you the completed model of 1187. Though I love the look of this engine, building the model presented some challenges that I had not foreseen. I'll start with the tender. In real life, 1187's tender is small and has a low profile, so the battery receiver, even laying down, is clearly visible and looks out of place. The tender is also too long, as it needs to accommodate the long axle trucks, which also use Big Ben Bricks wheels. That's enough for the tender, on for the locomotive. Because 1187 is an old engine, I wanted it to have old-style windows as a part of its design. I had plenty of the old-style windows you could see on the sides of the cab, but I didn't have any of the ones seen on the front, so I put a little money in and the result looks fantastic. The upperworks located on top of the boiler are connected with Technic pins and can easily be detached. The dome closest to the cab is taller, but wider on the real engine, and since LEGO offers no round parts in the correct scale, I simply made it taller. I also characterized 1187's builder's plates by having a 1x1 round black tile mounted on each side of the smoke box with a simple Technic pin. One thing I dislike about the model is the front leading axle. On the real 1187, the pilot truck is located directly under the smoke box, but I had to extend it further out so my model is able to go around turns. Also, the motor only has a single speed, and as I am controlling it with the powered up remote, I need to hold in the directional buttons in order for it to move. The engine is also, ironically, very weak as it struggles to pull 2 or even 3 freight cars. But I consider all of these problems to be relatively minor, and I'm very happy with how this model turned out. I also love the contrast of 1187's old appearance with the modern look of my other Penzi models. It's not a perfect model, but I'm satisfied with the result, and I do intend to revisit it and work on it again someday. I also still have a lot of Big Ben Bricks green wheels from the very first order I ever made from them. Who knows? Maybe I'll make an LNER engine or 2. Or 3. "1187 was built at the Pennsylvania Railroad's own Altoona shops in 1888 for the cost of $8,644. Originally designated as the R class, 1187 and the other H3s were meant to be the Penzi's premier mainline freight locomotives. As she performed admirably for over 2.5 decades. Weighing in at 149,000 pounds and equipped with 20-inch by 24-inch cylinders and 50-inch drive wheels, the H3s could produce 150 pounds of boiler pressure and possessed a tractive effort of 22,848 pounds. The H3s were also the first Penzi engines to be equipped with the Belpaire firebox. Identified by the squared-off section of boiler immediately in front of the cab, the Belpaire firebox was designed to increase the heating surface, which improved heat transfer and steam production. The design became so successful that it became a standard component of nearly every steam locomotive produced by the Pennsy until the end of steam locomotive production in 1946. A small four-axle tender provided 3,600 gallons of water and 15,000 tons of coal. The H3s were found system-wide on the Pennsy and quickly proved their worth while pulling long, heavy trains. In April of 1892, H3 number 283 pulled a 40-car long train of hoppers from Chicago to Philadelphia. The train weighed in at 2,000 tons, and 283 only needed assistance while tackling the steep grades in the mountains east of Pittsburgh. The H3s ran out their lives serving as freight locomotives, but in time, newer and larger freight engines began to bump them from the Pensy's roster. Number 1187 finished out her initial career in 1913 after 25 years of loyal service. Shortly after, she was bought by the John T. Dyer Quarry Company in Birdsboro, Pennsylvania, to pull heavy trains of stone from the quarry pits. This would be her new job for the next 26 years. In 1939, the Pennsy rediscovered 1187 and quickly reacquired her. She was restored and displayed at the New York World's Fair as the Pensy's oldest locomotive. She was displayed in front of number 6759, one of the new M1 mountain-type heavy freight locomotives. When the fair was over, 1187 was stored at several locations until she was sent to the Railroad Museum of Pennsylvania, along with the rest of the Pennsylvania Railroad Historical Collection in 1979. Today, 1187 sits on proud display inside the museum's main hall. She sits above an inspection pit, allowing visitors to inspect her from the bottom. Although it is very unlikely that 1187 will ever leave the museum or be restored to operational condition, 1187 stands today as a symbol of progress and Pennsy standardization.